Good afternoon, everybody. So our next speaker today is Jeremy Rasmussen. The title of his speech is Election Hacking, Getting Ready for the Russian Onslaught in 2020. A little bit about Jeremy. Jeremy Rasmussen is Chief Technology Officer in Abacode, a Florida-based company that provides managed cybersecurity services to growing businesses across all industries. Abacode employs global thought leaders and industry experts in ethical hacking, corporate governance, and incident response to provide its clients with a holistic view of cybersecurity. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of South Florida and founder of the USF White Hatters Computer Security Club. Since 2000, he has taught USF courses in cryptography and network security, ethical hacking, digital forensics and investigations, and mobile and wireless security. He has more than 25 years of experience in performing R&D and developing cybersecurity solutions for government and commercial customers. Jeremy is a certified information systems security professional, certified ethical hacker, and project management professional. He was named the 2017 Tampa Bay Technology Leader of the Year. For his presentation, efforts to protect the integrity of the U.S. voting system have become a national priority following allegations of Russian interference. Oh, all right, well, I have a habit of just going on too long. Let's give a 2019 warm welcome for Mr. Jeremy Rasmussen.
Really appreciate it. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I think we got everything sorted out now. So, election hacking. This is kind of a big deal, right? We've heard about it the last few years, and I got a cool opportunity to go behind the scenes. In fact, here's my shout out. So first of all, Abacode Cyber, I'm the CTO. Phil Buck is the one from Channel 10 News who got me interested in this whole area. And it was kind of funny because he was like, I'm going to hand over the keys to you. You get to do the interviews. I'm just going to stand by and shoot video. And so I got to actually do the interviewing and ask the questions. I was thankful to our Pinellas election supervisor, Deborah Clark, for letting us go behind the scenes and actually get on the systems and try to see, look at them. Some of these guys are really out there. Andrew Appel, Verified Voting, and some of these resources. These guys actually have gotten the systems into their labs and been able to do the hardware hacking and so forth. I haven't done that to that extent, but I have definitely studied some of the issues around that. The other thing I'd recommend to you is DEF CON Voting Village. This is Matt Blaze and some other folks who have tried to bring the awareness out there to the public about what are the issues around electronic voting and how can we implement best practices. And of course, as he said, White Hatter, shout out to my lads and ladies there who, that's our local team here of students that we're trying to, raise up for the future of cybersecurity here at USF. All right, so the first thing we actually do is show the video. It's like 2 minutes long, and then we'll talk about, basically expanding on what we found in that video to talk about, history of cyber attacks on voting and what are the threat vectors. We're going to go into 5 of them in particular and how we can come up with countermeasures for those to reduce risk. And then, I'm going to ask you some questions, but I think, I'll give you what my conclusions are, but maybe we'll open it up at the end for questions as well. All right. So first thing, cross your fingers and see if this will actually work. All right, let's do that. So right now it's playing out of that thing. So we're gonna bring it back here, and I'm gonna play it out of my computer sound. That's gonna be internal, and that's a good idea. We're just gonna put the mic up to it and cross your fingers.
No matter how fast how confident are you that you will be?
Yeah. Right, and recent polling actually shows that Americans are worried that our election systems are all hackers. So we decided to look at.
Any thoughts on this? Is it better through that thing? We can set this over here. Here you go, madam. There you go.
How Florida's election system stands up to the cybersecurity test.
I'm Phil Buck, and I'm a registered voter here in the state of Florida. But I'm also a journalist covering the 2018 midterm election. Cybersecurity is a huge concern in elections today, so I wanted to see just how secure our election systems are here in Florida. Oh, and instead of asking the questions myself, I brought a few hackers along with me.
Are the communications encrypted between the client and server?
Yes. Multiple layers of encryption.
There's no such thing as a 100% secure system. There's always going to be ways you can figure out how to get in. We also use something in some of our penetration testing called a rubber ducky, which actually has, it looks like a USB thumb drive, but it actually has the capability of doing keystrokes.
Sure.
Do you have physical security protections against somebody coming up and doing something like that?
Our culture is changing at the Supervisor of Elections office. We are talking about cybersecurity, we are thinking about cybersecurity, and we are constantly teaching about cybersecurity. Everyone in this building is always on guard for potential threats, whether it is picking up a USB in the parking lot or potentially clicking on an email upstairs. We have spent a considerable amount of time making sure that these systems are all accurate and secure. And prior to Election Day, we have K9 units come in from the Sheriff's Office to go through the machines.
So no internet connection?
No internet connection at all.
Overall, I feel pretty comfortable with how the elections are run. The equipment they're using is 10 plus years old, but they have some fail-safes in place, they have risk management in place, they have layers of security in place that would make it overall a difficult task if you were going to try to manipulate that system. I feel as a voter, I feel comfortable walking into the polling place and casting my vote and that it's going to count, the way that I intended it to.
Great story. Rasmussen and other cybersecurity experts agree it would be extremely hard for hackers to actually change vote tallies here in Florida, but they say just sowing mistrust in our election system and creating doubt in voters' minds could be enough of a victory for our enemies. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you're in line by 7, you can still vote. You get a
Appreciate that. Well done, team. All right, so I kind of stole my own thunder at the end. I don't know if I'm that comfortable as I came off on that. We had done this right on. So I was very gracious. It was very gracious of them to even let us in with all that they had going on. But so the first thing I want to do is let's talk about history of cyber attacks on voting. And the thing we're not going to talk about is what I would call pre-voting cyber attacks. So we're well aware that Hillary's campaign manager, John Podesta, his email was hacked. We know that there was coordinated information warfare where they're disseminating some of those leaked documents to DC Leaks and WikiLeaks. We know that they were trying to manipulate public perception through fake, bot accounts on Twitter and, collecting data through Facebook and all this, fake news stories and all that. We know all that was going on. What I'm really concerned with, though, could somebody tamper the election count itself? So in the history of the United States, the answer is we don't think anybody's ever done it, as far as we can tell. There have been attacks. There have been attacks on voter registration databases. We know that people have tried to tamper systems, but as far as we know, the fail-safes up till now have been good enough to keep us secure. But to read some of this research, maybe we were just kind of lucky up till now, or maybe somebody's suppressing things. That's the other possibility. But as far as we know, nobody's ever, been able to change the election results of the U.S. This is not the way it is worldwide. There was a book written about 10 years after the fact about how somebody cyber attacked, when Nelson Mandela and the ANC were trying to come into power in '94, there was a cyber attack to try to keep them out of power. We know the Russians have come after the Ukrainian elections, the Estonian elections in 2014. They did a DDoS trying to discredit the Ukrainian election results. Estonia does their voting online, which is really a bad idea for a number of other reasons. But they that's they've been hacked continuously. And then the 2016 Indian elections, I was reading about that. This was just in the news like a couple of weeks ago. Basically, they were saying that hackers manipulated those results, that they got some of the candidates running for office to pay up to like $1 million US to buy into this system where they would paste these microchips under the voting machines and then sit out in the parking lot and wirelessly control them. Now, I got to thinking about that. I don't know what kind of chip can do that per se, pasting it out under the thing. And in fact, when they asked the hackers to do like a proof of concept, they were never able to like show this thing in action. So they also made all these claims, like they were saying people were killed to cover up the story. There was big IT firms involved in the scam and all this, but none of those claims were ever proven, at least according to the Indian Election Commission. All right, so the things we're going to talk about in particular are places that an attacker could tamper an election to change the results and then sow chaos or distrust in the system. That's in registering voters, provisioning the voting systems, the voting collection of votes themselves, counting the votes, and then reporting of the results. Those are all the places along the way. And I just want to put this up here first. Anybody familiar with this? Anybody seen this snippet of code before? No? Oh, really? Man, I thought we'd have like a lot of people like into this. This is good old favorite piece of code. Jira's warming up the stack. The point of this piece of code is, if you look at it closely, if I don't know anybody, if you do software development or if you know anything about software security, but you can see there's a variable called cookie, and there's another one that's a character buffer, 80 buffer character. Do we ever input the value of cookie here? No. We print out what the value of cookie is, and we print out the buff. This gets the string called buff, but then it's comparing this value called cookie, and if it's equal to some value, then you win. But we never got the value in. So that means you have to manipulate the input to this program to overwrite the value of buff with 80 characters, and then it's little endian, so you have to actually print the hex value backwards and then push all that into stack to get to the point where you execute this line of code, you win. And if you go on GitHub or places like that, people have done walkthroughs of this where they solve it in about 7 or 8 different ways. This is just one way I've shown you here. The bottom line is, as long as I get to you win, then you win. In the same way here, if I can tamper the system at anywhere along the way to show the wrong value, then I win as the attacker. All right, so the first threat vector is the registration sites. What are those things? It's really a web front end and a database back end, right? That's what a lot of it is. And so the threat there is exploiting, a poorly configured database, or being able to do a SQL injection, cross-site scripting attack, whatever, bypassing authentication so that I can get into the back-end database and read it or manipulate it. Well, a couple of years ago, this hacker, David Levin, who was a pen tester, I don't remember the name of his company, I couldn't find their website anymore, couldn't find him on LinkedIn, I don't think he's really around anymore, but at the time he decided he would go do a pen test on the Lee County Elections Office website, and he used Havich. Has anybody ever used that SQL injection tool? Pretty powerful, tool. And he was able to access all the user IDs and passwords of everybody in the office. And he stopped just short of getting to voter data and like social security numbers. He could have gotten there, he said, but he stopped. The issue is he did not have authorization to do this pen test. He was not brought in by Lee County. And so when he posted his YouTube video about it, and he told the person who was running for supervisor elections against the incumbent about it, it kind of caused kind of a nightmare. So the correct thing to do for this, vector mitigation is, obviously Webapp pen testing by having an authorized third party do it. Now, I asked they're kind of tight about who does this stuff. I asked the deputy supervisor elections in Pinellas, hey, can we be your pen testing team? And she's like, we already have a team. Is it an internal team, external team? Both. Okay, well, can I talk to your internal folks just to ask? No. Who is your external team? Can't tell you. Really? This is a public organization. So when's your RFP coming out? Don't know. So like they were very tight-lipped about it. They wouldn't tell me anything. But one would hope if they're doing things in accordance with best practices, they're going to be doing a static level code analysis. That's where you're putting our code through some kind of binary search tree, looking for terms that would lead to indicators of unsafe code that could be exploited. And you're doing dynamic analysis, which is actually interfacing with the running app, fuzz testing it, using proxies, things like that to see if you can break it and make it do something it's not supposed to do. The other thing you want to do is run routine checks of your database to make sure nobody's tampering the integrity of the voter registration data. And if something does happen, reporting up the chain. Now, I can tell you, the DoD has laws in place now. The DFARS, what's called Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, says if you have an incident, even on unclassified data, if it's sensitive data, FOUO, PII, export control data, you've got to report that up the chain, and there's a specific way you do that. There's no equivalent for election hacking. So you have all this dispersed. Elections are taking place. They're not centrally governed by one authority. They're all pushed out to the counties of states. And so there's no uniform way that you have to accomplish security, and there's no uniform way that you have to report incidents up the chain. So that's a big issue. The second threat vector is when the machines are provisioned. Now, this is fun. If you go to DEF CON Voting Village, they always have a lot of fun with this. They, this year I saw them, the Diebold TSX ones, they were able to upload like a custom version of Linux and get it to play like whatever music and videos they wanted to. There's three types of machines we're talking about here. You've got the poll books, which are, that's the book that it used to be a paper one where you sign your name to, you show your ID, sign in, and that's when you're allowed, prove that you're allowed to vote here. Then you've got the actual tabulation system. That's the one where you fill out the thing and put it in and it scans it. And then you also have the counting machines. That's the ones that count the number of votes. Okay, so they've hacked all these, basically. The polling machine, the Diebold one, they found out root password was password, right? The AccuVote counting machine, they figured out if you can give me 30 seconds access to that with the JTAG connector in my laptop, I can hack into the thing, drop it in a shell, and have admin rights over the thing. So the issue is these voting machine makers are very closed-lipped, tight-lipped. They don't talk about how they're doing things. They don't invite peer review from the outside. There are some standards in place that say they have to go through independent testing labs, but I've seen like there's only 5 labs in the country that do any of the vote machine testing, and one of them got dropped off because they weren't doing it right. Another one, I think, got dropped. Maybe there's only 3 active ones now. The issue here is, we've got to do away with this security through obscurity. That's a losing proposition, right? Think about advanced encryption standard, right? That's when we wanted to have a new encryption standard. We put it up. We had a contest, asked for people to put in their candidate algorithm, and then everybody peer-reviewed it, banged on it. Once we found it was secure, that became the standard. I would like to see the same thing with voting machines, right? Not telling people how you're doing it. You may or may not be doing it the right way. Not making any of these results available for anybody to see or inspect. We don't know if you're doing it the right way or not. One of the issues is ESS, which is Election Systems of Software. That's the maker of the one that we use here in Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. It's also the most widely used one around. They didn't even have a CISO until last year. They didn't have a security officer. Some of these companies weren't using two-factor authentication for email, so that you can imagine they could get easily phished and then use that as an entry point and pivot into the rest of the organization. And then what do you do? I mean, you can drop malware, and there's all kinds of things you can do. So as a company, we always say, all right, you got to have the governance in place. You got to have the leadership. It starts with security policy, having a plan, a formalized program. You have to have continuous monitoring to make sure nobody's changing the integrity of your organization environment. You have to have continuous assessments, pen tests, and then fix stuff after you find it, remediate, patching process in place, incident response. And then you got to train your users not to be victims to to phishing and social engineering. If you don't have those things, the basics in place, your whole organization could be at risk. All right, the next threat vector, and this is the one where we had fun, walking around inside the supervisor elections headquarters, is looking at these voting systems themselves. So there are still places in the U.S., and in fact in this county, where we're using paperless DRE touchscreen voting machines. The reason those things are so bad is they don't have a paper trail, right? It's an electronic vote. So imagine if somebody could hack into that system, they could change your vote, you wouldn't know it, and then there's no paper trail saying otherwise. We'd still use those to some extent for accessibility. So handicapped and disabled voters still use a DRE type system. Everybody else uses for early voting and for day of voting, we use something called a DS200, which is a system which is an optical scanner system. DS200 and that type of system, basically fill in a little bubble, you send it through the thing, and it counts it, and then, like I said, you have a paper receipt. So if something should go wrong, at least we can go back to the real paper and compare it versus what the computer reported. So I was thinking about this, poking around in the back of these ES200 systems, whatever they're called. There's a little side panel that has like a little barrel lock on it. I was like, okay, if I approach that thing with some lock picking tools, I could take that thing off lickety-split probably. And there's different things that the USBs can either be used to pull data out of the system in terms of tally results. They're also used for flashing new firmware. So if you knew exactly how the thing worked, and again, you're not going to find a user manual probably. Well, you might be able to find a user manual out there. You're not going to find like a tech spec that tells you the protocols and all that stuff. But you could probably figure it out though. Then maybe I'd be able to tamper it. But what are the countermeasures to that? Well, theoretically, they never leave these systems alone. Poll workers are trained to watch if somebody's trying to tamper the system and report to the authorities. If you tamper that system, you're only going to do that one system. You're not going to affect the entire election, right? So you might be able to tamper some votes for one system, but we always have the paper ballots as backup. So we, can, if we find some statistical anomaly, we can go back and check and do a recount. What about, so they were telling us these things connect wirelessly back to the mothership. So I was like, whoa. 802.11? They're like, no. It doesn't go to an access point here. It's a broadband modem. I was like, really? That's interesting. And you heard me on the thing, hey, is that encrypted? And he's like, oh yeah, layers and layers of encryption. Okay. I don't know. So I have to believe him. I couldn't set up a pico cell and try to make the thing connect, and then obviously I didn't have authorization to do that or the time to do it, but I would like to know more about that. So theoretically, it is a communication that goes back. And by the way, what's the connect back for? It's only for first night reporting. So the official ballot is not from that. That's only for reporting early results. That's not the official one anyway. Now, having said all this, the guys from Princeton go to the polls early every year, and they always find unattended voting machines at the precincts that they could walk right up to and tamper. So they have fun with this. Especially in Florida, we have poll workers who may not be technically savvy. Now, I'll say, my parents I'd exclude from this list. If my parents were poll workers, my dad, he's a 40 years engineer at Honeywell. He sets up his own networks. He told me things I had to do to set up location-based services on my phone. So, he's, accepted from this. But I would say most 80-year-olds or plus probably don't know what to look for in terms of people trying to tamper these systems. And most young people probably don't want to be poll workers. So that could be an issue. One other thing I'll mention. So Pinellas and Hillsborough use what's called AutoMark, which means you fill out the little ballot, you slip it through the thing, it counts it through an optical scanner, and then you're done. These other counties, Polk, Pasco, and Manatee, and I pulled this right off the Manatee website where they show you this, use something called Express Vote. Okay, this is a weird system. I don't even know why they have this. You take a blank sheet, you put it in the thing, you tap your choices on the thing, it prints them out onto the paper, then you have a button that says either, I trust the system, to vote for me, to have put the right things on there, or not, or I want to check it. Boom. So if you hit the button that says I'm in a hurry, I don't have time to check this, that's like the permission to cheat button, in my opinion. But if you pop it out, so here you could think of an attack, right? The attack would only take place to manipulate the vote if the person says, I'm not going to check. If they say, I am going to check, oh yeah, very accurate every time. Yep, that's exactly what I put in there. And then you have to put the thing back in again. So it slows down voting. I don't know why you would have that versus just having somebody scratch in the thing. The next threat vector is counting votes. So think about this. You're either unintentionally or unintentionally misreporting the outcome. The solution, of course, is auditing. So if the election is very close, you're going to have a recount. If sometimes they'll even do statistical analysis, like if this county went 100% Democrat last time and now it's voting Republican, that's kind of odd. We're gonna that's going to trigger a recount. Or if we show undervotes, undervote means you have fewer votes for a candidate than you have ballots. Overvote means you have more possible votes than there are ballots. So like somebody accidentally bubbled in two things for one choice. Either of those are going to trigger revotes, or not revote, but a recount. The thing is, how that is spelled out differs from state to state, county to county throughout the United States. We already know that 25 plus states don't have adequate sampling in place. So a sophisticated attack could maybe trick the system and still get past some tampering without it being noticed by these sampling measures. So they've come up with a new thing called RLA, Risk Limiting Audit. They're already doing this in Colorado. They're sampling it, or they're starting to do it in Virginia, California. We definitely want to bring this here to Florida. Basically, it says, regardless of if something triggers a recount or not, I'm going to do human inspection of a random sample of every ballot just to make sure it's consistent with what the computer says. That seems like common sense, doesn't it? But we're not doing it. In the DEF CON voting village every year, they have a vote, and of course, you can imagine what would happen if we reported the wrong results, right? This threat vector of reporting the results, that's going to sow distrust, the foundation of our society. I mean, back in the 40s, there was that whole Dewey defeats Truman thing. I don't know if that was wrong, and the paper had to eat crow for reporting that, but I don't know if it sowed distrust. But if the official election results on the state of Florida website say, Gillum won, but it was really DeSantis, or vice versa, that could cause a lot of chaos, right? Well, every year they do a vote there, and of course they're able to tamper the results. This year they had George Washington going up against Benedict Arnold. Those two got a number of correct votes, but of course the dark tangent, Jeff Moss actually won the election through tampering. I don't know if you saw this story, but they're like, oh, this kid hacked into the state of Florida elections website in 10 minutes. Not exactly. It's a little bit of hype. Let me tell you what happened. So DEF CON has, just like we have a kids CTF here at BSides Tampa, they have Roots Asylum. They brought them over to the voting village and had them hack into some fake sites that were set up just like the state of Florida election results site. They were set up to have, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, vulnerabilities, and so forth. They taught the kids how to do SQL injection, and this kid was able to land an exploit in 10 minutes. So that made worldwide news. Oh, these sites, these election sites are terrible. Well, the National Association of Secretaries of State, not too happy about that. They're like, we support what you're doing here to have safer voting, but we're concerned that creating mock election office networks and voter registration databases for participants to defend and/or hack is unrealistic. So what's the threat mitigation for reporting hacking? Good thing is, like I said earlier, those first night results aren't official, and the risk limiting audits are going to kick in, which is going to trigger recounts. But can somebody tell me why first night reporting is so dangerous or so significant, like especially here on the East Coast? That's right. So think of this. Say, Trump was, winning the whole East Coast and had looked like enough electoral votes to win the whole presidency. By the time he got out to the West Coast, California, Seattle, whatever, people were like, I'm not going to show up. I don't even care. But it could have been manipulated to look like it was a win when it really wasn't. And that could change the whole outcome of the election. That's why that stuff's still important. Just as we said before, what's the best practice for that type of thing? Static and dynamic analysis, good web design, quality assurance. Make sure you've got the OWASP top 10 covered for, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgeries, authentication, and so forth. All right, so to wrap it all up, just as with all systems, there's got to be layers of security. You can't depend on one thing. We saw there's so many different ways, different places across the spectrum. It's a complex problem, right? It's a whole big attack surface of many different points. I think with Pinellas and Hillsborough, at least we are using best practices regarding voting and counting. We're doing the right things there. I can't tell you if we're doing the right things around the registering, provisioning, and reporting because I didn't have any access to that. I asked about web security best practices. They wouldn't tell me. We didn't get into. I wasn't allowed to see the software being provisioned. I don't know what their development environment looks like. So there's things I couldn't report on. And of course, we didn't get into, all this nonsense with Palm Beach County and Broward County when they had these missing provisional ballots and ballots that showed up in people's trunks of cars and ballots that showed up in playgrounds. I couldn't get into any of that. So that's yet another thing. But as far as I can tell, at least with regard to the voting and counting for Pinellas and Hillsborough, we're doing the right things. All right, question time. Again, I learned a lot about doing this. It's like it's an onion, layers and layers and layers. If I had to do this full time, I would love to get some of the systems in. I don't think it's very easy to get the systems in. Up in Princeton, they were able to do it like back in the early 2000s. You could go like on eBay and get some of these things in your lab, but they're really tight about that now. They don't let those systems get out into the public. So anybody have a question? Yes. Mobile app voting, horrific. Any type of digital voting in it. I didn't even get into that. Online voting, no way, because it's so easy to manipulate systems. Right? There's no such thing as a 100% secure system. If you don't have a paper trail in place, you're going to be at risk. And we don't have a good alternative for that. In the future, maybe we'll see. Here's the only thing I might be able to support in the future. So in the DoD, they have something called a CAC, Common Access Card. If you went in and presented all your credentials and had maybe some biometric information put on the chip on that card, and that's encrypted, and you have like a private key, public key certificate, and then that is physically used to do the voting, maybe. Okay, well, if Estonia used that, I wouldn't. If Estonia used it, then it's not good enough. All right, so I thought that's the only way I would go that route, but I'm still nervous about that. Somebody said something funny the other day though. He's like, we all do our taxes on TurboTax, right? And that's like, we trust them to hold all our money, and that's the biggest tax thing connected to the government and all that. So it's like, what are they doing right, and do you trust them? Well, it's a good point. It's a fair point, but I just don't trust that. Audit trails are too easy to manipulate and change. It's too easy for people to get into websites and hack them, and so I would much rather have something that has a layers of human factors. Now, that's not even foolproof. As you recall from the last election, Rick Scott sued some of these counties for not having enough people present at the recount, commensurate with what the law required. So even the human factor of the manual recount can be messed up, right? So there's all these things. Any other questions? Question over here. So again, I haven't heard it hasn't been proven that the Russians actually tried to manipulate tally counts. As I said, their big thing was sowing discord amongst us by manipulating public perception through social media and fake news and stuff like that. See, if we're all at each other's throats, that affects our democracy, and they win, right? That weakens America, that strengthens them. Now, following on to that, here's a question: where are the Chinese in all this? They're keeping quiet. They're stealing intellectual property, right? Okay, they realize they have so much invested in the U.S. Like, they don't want to see us crumble because they're going to lose a lot of money. Okay, Russia stands to benefit if we're weaker. China actually stands to lose if we're weaker because they lose a lot of their investment that they have here. So now, having said that, that has not stopped them from going after companies and stealing intellectual property. But as far as we can tell, they're kind of hands off of our elections. Question in the back? Isn't that incredible? Yeah, this is a great point. Some of these guys who are doing the research, they're saying the safest way to report these is just like they did 200 years ago with the town crier. Have all the people together at the poll, count the thing together and say, here's the result, and write it down, and everybody has a copy, right? And everybody's using pencil and paper. You can't get any more secure than that than having a whole room of people knowing what that is versus having a computer count something, which the computer can be manipulated. That's what this whole conference is about. Unless they can come up with a technology that is provably secure. So I was having a discussion with people earlier about provably secure systems. On paper, they look great. They're theoretically great. But any system has to be implemented by a human, designed and implemented by a human, and operated by a human. That's where mistakes can happen. Question over here. How much are they doing what? No, that's an optional feature. So some of the ES200s have a landline modem, some have a broadband modem, but that's actually an optional feature that not all of the precincts use, not all of the counties use. So we use it, I guess. They can get some early numbers for reporting purposes. I'm guaranteed Broward County doesn't use it because we don't get numbers from them till like a week later. All right, thanks very much. Cheers.